Hello and welcome. I'm so happy that you have joined me here today. We are looking at the book of Judges, and we are looking at specifically at Judges chapter 4 today. We'll be looking at Deborah, the judge. So grab yourself a cuppa and we'll get started. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I look forward to seeing and reading some of your comments. A trigger warning for today is that this study will contain references to battle scenes and it will include some gory details. So Judges chapter 4 and Judges chapter 5 are written in an interesting manner. Judges chapter 4 is prose, so it's written in just the common language of the day, in ordinary form. It's the spoken language of that day. It's got no poetic structure. While Judges chapter 5 is written in the poetry form, in a song. So to tell a story in a prose method first, and then to retell it in the story of to retell that story in the form of a poem or a song is a very common Middle Eastern literacy method. And this writing style is contemporary to this date in history. So it gives credence and authenticity to the scripture that we are studying today. Let's look at verse 1. Again, Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord now that Ehud was dead. So we continue seeing Israel repeat this cycle of sin. Israel had peace for 80 years after Ehud. The people fell back into sin and idolatry. God sent an oppressor over Israel. Then Israel cried out to God, and God sent a judge. So verse 2. So the Lord sold them into the hands of Jabin, king of Canaan, who reigned in Hazor. Sisera, the commander of his army, was based in Hashereth in Hagganum. Because he had 900 chariots fitted with iron and had cruelly oppressed the Israelites for 20 years, they cried out to the Lord for help. So we see a new character enter here, King Jabin of Canaan. So the Lord gave the Israelites to be oppressed by King Jabin. And after Ehud died, God allowed King Jabin of Canaan to oppress the Israelites at this time. Jabin, king of Hazor, is also mentioned in Judges chapter 11, some 170 years before. But Joshua killed this king, and he also killed all the people in that city of Hazor, and the city was burnt to the ground. So how can we reconcile these two accounts of King Jabin? After Israel had completed the conquest of southern Canaan, they headed north to bring the northern region of that country under their dominion. And the most powerful city at that time in the north was Hazor, and the king was called Jabin. So we can see that in Joshua chapter 11. And with God's help, Joshua advanced against Hazor. Joshua and the Israelite army killed all the inhabitants of Hazor, including the king, and they set the city ablaze. But according to Bible chronology, this took place about 1400 BC, some 140 years before the record of King Jabin that we see in Debroah. And here, the Israelites at Deborah's time, they're involved in another struggle against King Hazor. But of course, this is not the same King Hazor that was defeated by Joshua. Besides the fact that there's 140 years that separated the two events, we're told specifically that the first Jabin in Joshua was killed by the Israelites. So these two kings, we've got two kings, both called Jabin, both king of Hazor. Did the Bible writers get these two events mixed up? Did they confuse two stories? Could it be that they've got two different versions of the same account? By no means, it's no. Even though the Bible critics have had a field day with these two Jabins, archaeology does show that the Bible was right all along. There are several facts about the Jabins, since it's actually a dynastic name. So it's sort of like the pharaohs of the Egyptian kings, or the Hadads of the Syrian kings, or the Caesars of the Roman kings. So it's a dynastic name. It's not a personal identifying name. So that's why we have two Jabins in the Bible. Verse 3. The captain of the Canaanite army was Sisera, and he had some special weaponry. He had 900 chariots fitted with iron. So we're just going to do a bit of a side study, just for interest sake, on what chariots are like. The major Canaanite army's military threat came from their 900 chariots. The writer of Judges particularly blames the failure of the conquest of the whole of the land of Canaan on the fact that the Canaanite army had these iron chariots. We can see that in Judges chapter 1, verse 19. The chariots upgraded an average army army to threatening, undefeatable levels. The army with chariots had an incredible advantage over those on foot. Chariots were usually pulled by 2 horses, and there was 1 or 2 riders on the cart. So one would have directed the cart, and the other would be throwing javelins or shooting arrows or striking down the foot soldiers with a sword. So typically speaking, armies with chariots never fell to an army that was just on foot. So this is why this victory in Judges chapter 4 is such a miracle. Verse 3, the Israelites again cried out to the Lord. So again we see the cycle of sin reoccurring. God frees the Israelites from an oppressor, there's peace in the land, Israel turns away from God, they worship other gods, God sends an oppressor, and this time it's the Canaanites who cruelly oppress the Israelites. And then we're up to the point of Israel cries out to the Lord. So they cried out to the Lord for 20 years, for 2 decades, and we learn that sometimes we need to persist in prayer, sometimes for decades. And it doesn't mean that God isn't hearing us, it means that God is using this time of waiting for his purposes. Verse 4, now Deborah, a prophet, the wife of Lapidoth, was leading Israel at this time. She held court under the palm of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim. The Israelites went up to her to have their disputes settled. So just for interest's sake, Deborah means honeybee, and I just imagine her parents when she was a baby calling her honeybee. I think that is so sweet. So Deborah was Israel's only female judge. Deborah, like many of the other judges, was an unlikely hero, in the same way that many other judges were unexpected leaders. So Deborah, being a female, is unexpected. God uses the unexpected people to work through them and display his glory. The Deborah held court, and some people consider it unexpected for God to raise up a woman to be a judge and a leader in Israel. Deborah was a woman greatly used by God, and she also was a woman who was respected by the people of God, so that she had authority over them. So notably Barak. She even had a tree named after her. The palm was called the Palm of Deborah. And she was given special wisdom to sort out the disputes within her tribe. Verse 6, she sent for Barak, son of Abinoam, from Kadesh in Naphtali. She said to him, the Lord, the God of Israel, commands you, go, take with you 10,000 men of Naphtali and Zebulun, and lead them up to Mount Tabor. I will lead Sisera, the commander of Jabin army, with the chariots and the troops to the Kishon River, and give them into your hands. So Judges 4 verses 6 to 7. What problems had the people of Israel faced because of the oppression of the Canaanites? They, starting with her role as a prophet, the counselor, she's called a judge. So she starts off as a prophet, and then and a counselor, and now she's a judge. She leads with inspiration from the Spirit, and she communicates God's direction to the people of Israel. God told her to tell Barak that the Lord commanded him to lead 10,000 men from Naphtali and Zebulun to war against Sisera, who was the leader of the Canaanite army. God says that he is going to intervene by leading the army, which is led by Sisera, to the Kishon River, where God is going to orchestrate his army to fall in defeat against the Israelite army. Verse 8, Barak said to her, if you go with me, I will go, but if you don't go with me, I won't go. Certainly I will go with you, says Deborah, but because of the course that you are taking, the honour will not be yours, for the Lord will deliver Sisera into the hands of a woman. So Deborah went with Barak to Kadesh. There Barak summoned Zebulun and Naphtali, and 10,000 men went up under his command, and Deborah also went with him. So God directs Deborah to tell Barak to lead Israel to victory over Sisera and his army. Barak appears to have great respect for Deborah's leadership and agrees to go only if Deborah herself will go. And if she doesn't go, then Barak's going to refuse to go. And his answer appears to stem from great confidence in Deborah's ability, but not as much confidence in God's promises and his faithfulness. So let's be a bit gracious to Barak for this, because don't we often do the same thing? But thank God for his faithfulness even when we doubt. This story shows the importance of just simple obedience. We can be obedient to God's calling because he is faithful to his promises. He will equip us with every good thing to do his will. We see that in Hebrews 13, verse 21. So Deborah, she submits to Barak's decision and went with him to war. In faith, she supports what the Lord said about Israel achieving victory over the Canaanites. But using her gift of prophecy, she predicts that the honour for winning the battle won't be Barak's, but it will be given to a woman. And we'll see that fulfilled a little bit later in the chapter. Verse 11, now Heber the Canaanite had left the other Kenites, the descendants of Hobed, Moses' brother-in-law, and pitched a tent by the great tree in Zanim, near Kadesh. And when they told Sisera that Barak, son of Obed, had come up to Mount Tabor, Sisera summoned from Herodesh and Haggiom to the Kishon River all the men and the 900 chariots with iron. So verse 11 suggests that Heber, the Canaanite, may have been Sisera's ally, because he tells Sisera that Barak has come to fight him. And he seems to be the forewarning for battle. And so forewarned is forearmed. So there was an alliance between King Jabin of Canaan, Israel's enemy and Sisera's king, and the family of Heber. We see that in Judges 4 verse 17, but we'll come back to this a little bit later in the story, so just hold that thought about the alliance between the two. So the Kenites, let's have a look at them for a second. They're mentioned in verse 11 and verse 17. So the Kenites, they were also known as the Midianites. They're not from the tribe of Israel, and so they're not ethnically Jewish. The Kenites were an ancient people living near the land of Canaan around the time of Abraham, and the Bible mentions several dealings between the Israelites and the Kenites, who were always on friendly terms with each other. Moses' father-in-law, so Jethro, was a Kenite, and thus Moses married into the Kenite tribe. Moses lived among the Kenites for many years before God called him to be the one to deliver Israel from enslavement in Egypt. So the Kenites, they resided in Judah near Kadesh. However, at this time of the book of Judges, we see that Heber had formed an alliance with the Canaanites. Verse 12, Sisera, the commander of the Canaanite army, he hears that the Israelite army is coming and then prepares for battle by mustering all his men and the 900 chariots fitted with iron. And while this text doesn't explicitly say the number of foot soldiers he has, it implies a large infantry force that accompanied the chariots, as Sisera's army was supposed to be superior in numbers to the Israelites' 10,000 soldiers. Verse 14, then Deborah said to Barak, go, this is the day the Lord has given Sisera into your hands. Has not the Lord gone ahead of you? So Barak went down to Mount Tabor with 10,000 men following him. At Barak's advance, the Lord routed Sisera and all his chariots and armies by the sword, and Sisera got down from his chariot and fled on foot. Barak pursued the chariots and the army as far as Harosheth and Haggion, and all Sisera's troops fell to the sword. Not a man was left. So Deborah restates God's call to fight and that they will win the battle and defeat Sisera because the Lord has gone ahead of the Israelites. Barak went with his 10,000 soldiers and Barak advanced, but the text gives full credit to the Lord fighting the battle. Sisera flees on foot and the foot soldiers were pursued and all were killed by the sword. So Barak is mentioned in the list of those with great faith in Hebrews 11. And how can we reconcile these two character references about Barak? On one hand, he does not seem to have enough confidence in God to go to battle without the aid of Deborah, but on the other hand, he is recognised in Hebrews chapter 11. So let's look at the Hebrews 11 account of him. Hebrews 11 verses 32 to 34, it says, and what more shall I say? I do not have time to tell you about Gideon and Barak, Samson and Jephthah, and David and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith they conquered kingdoms, they administered justice, they gained what was promised, they shut the mouths of the lions, they quenched the fury of the flames, they escaped the edge of the sword, whose weakness was turned into strength, and who became powerful in battle and routed foreign armies. So he's mentioned there as being a man of great faith. So perhaps because he had the faith the size of a mustard seed, perhaps because he faithfully obeyed despite his fears and uncertainties, or perhaps it's a lesson for all of us too, that we can still have faith in God and follow him, even though we have fears, we're unclear, we're uncertain, because obedience is based on faith, even if that faith is such a small amount, so small like a mustard seed. That faith is of great value to God. We can see that in Matthew 17 verses 20. So as Deborah told Barak, Sisera's army is delivered into the hands of Israel. But Sisera himself, he's yet to be defeated. He has fled on foot. Verse 17. Sisera, meanwhile, fled on foot to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, because there was an alliance between King Jabin of Hazor and the family of Heber the Kenite. Jael went out to meet Sisera and said to him, "Come, my lord, come right in, don't be afraid." So he entered her tent and she covered him with a blanket. "I'm thirsty," he said. "Please come and give me some water." And so she opened a skin of milk and gave him a drink and covered him up. "Stand in the doorway of the tent," he told her. "If someone comes by and asks you if anyone is there, say no." But Jael, Heber's wife, she picked up a tent peg and a hammer and went quietly to him while he lay fast asleep, exhausted. She drove the tent peg through his temple into the ground, and he died. Just then Barak came by in pursuit of Sisera, and Jael went out to meet him. "Come," she said, "I will show you the man you're looking for." So he went with her, and there lay Sisera in the tent with a peg through his temple, dead. And on that day, God subdued King Jabin of Canaan before the Israelites and handed them over, and the Israelites pressed harder and harder against King Jabin of Canaan until they destroyed him. So Jael, she gives reassurance to Sisera and hides him in her tent and covers him. She shows him hospitality to him by giving him a drink of water. He feels safe there because there is an alliance between her husband's family and Sisera's king. But Jael, she deceives him by letting him sleep while she prepares to kill him. And so here's my confusion. On one hand, the Kenites have an alliance between them and King Jabin, but on the other hand, this Kenite is going to kill the leader of their army. And it's her husband's family that has the alliance with the Canaanites. So I don't actually understand this confliction, but if you have any observations or any opinions, please put your comments, and I'd love to hear your opinion. And so now it's actually interesting to note that Kenite women were the ones who usually erected and disassembled the tents. So Jael, she would have been very capable. She would have been very strong. She could have easily handled a hammer and a tent peg. So as far as biblical womanhood goes, she nailed it. So Deborah had said that God would hand Sisera over to a woman. So she said that back in Judges 4, verse 22. And we can see that the fulfillment of Deborah's prophecy is shown. It shows a lot about God's character. It shows that he's faithful. It shows that he is trustworthy and truthful. And his word cannot be thwarted by any human. And God's faithfulness and God's trustworthiness and God's sovereignty are some of the first things that we doubt about him when our life becomes difficult, when we're faced with tough decisions or when something bad happens out of our control, but it shouldn't. It's those very times that we need to remind ourselves that he does remain faithful, that he is trustworthy and he is sovereign, he is in control of all things. And it is good to remind ourselves of them, and it is good to remind our friends who suffer. He is faithful, he is in control, and he loves us. And that's all I have time for you today from Judges chapter 4. It's been a pleasure spending time with you again, and I look forward when we study the next chapter, Judges chapter 5, and continue in our study of Deborah. Bye for now.